So today's webinar is on purchase orders. Purchase orders, you can put in purchase orders several ways. We'll go over those different ways. You can print out purchase order reports, and if you're signed up with certain vendors, then you can actually do electronic purchase orders. So to get to purchase orders, we go on the left-hand side to this purchase tab and purchase orders. Now, some of you may not see that tab only because you did not purchase that module with us. So if you wanted that, you have to contact sales and they can give you a quote on that. But if you see purchase, you would then see purchase orders, and you will see a list of purchase orders that have not been received yet. Now, some of them may have been received to your store, but if they're still in here, they're not received in TeamDME. As an example, this top one here, it's blue. Blue means that it is that you marked it, that you got it, but you still have to post it. And after we put in a couple purchase orders, I'll go through those steps. So these are current purchase orders that have not been received into TeamDME yet. So the first thing we're going to do, though, is we're going to go and look at an item. And the reason we're going to go and look at an item is we have to make sure that the item is set up. So inside of items, we're going to go to a walker with wheels. So we're going to bring up this item. And what we're going to do is we're going to go to the vendor tab. The vendor tab is where you can set up as many vendors that you buy this item from. We have Invacare in there. Maybe you buy it sometimes from McKesson, because if Invacare is out of stock, you need to get it from McKesson. So we can set up another vendor in here. Click on the plus sign, come down here to vendor, start typing in some letters. And then under unit of measure, we have eaches and cases. Now, why do we have both? The only reason we have both is because under the packaging tab, we set up two different unit of measures. One is an each, one is a case. And if you look, the case is set up so that there are two eaches per case. So when you purchase a case, it will automatically see that there are two eaches in a case. And when it updates the quantity on hand over here under the location tab, this quantity on hand, whatever location it is, will increase by 2 for every case that you purchase. So that's setting up another unit of measure here. Just an FYI, people that have not attended my item webinar, you always need to have the smallest unit of measure at the top and then larger units of measure after that. And it's going to keep track of your inventory by the smallest unit of measure. You can't just have a case in there if you also sell it by the eaches, because we can't do 1.5 cases in inventory. We have to have a whole number. And so you would need the smaller unit of measure first, and then subsequent unit of measures that are larger. And once it's in here, then when you're going to the vendor tab and setting up a vendor, you can then choose one of those two units of measure. So I'm just going to say this is an each, and we're going to put in the vendor reorder number. That's what this is. That may not be the same as up top what the item ID is. That item ID we recommend as the model number, but for McKesson, they have a 7-digit reorder number. That's what you need to put under vendor item number. And then you can put in the last cost. and you will see when I hit this check mark up top here, you will see in this fifth column, last cost for Invacare is $60. However, that's a case. And then the last cost for McKesson is $35, but those are eaches. Now, the one last thing to point out here is the third column, it says preferred. This would be the preferred vendor that you want the system to use when you're doing automatic purchase orders from medical orders, like a drop ship or something. It needs to know which vendor you want to use. Well, we're going to, wherever it's checked, that's the one it's going to use. If you want to move that check mark down to here, we just have to click on so McKesson there, and then hit this big preferred box on the right bottom, and the check mark moves to the vendor that you're sitting on. We'll put it back to Invacare. But if you're just putting a purchase order in, you can choose either purchase order for this item. Also, besides like the drop ship, we also have a suggested purchase order, and I'll go through that, and it's also going to pick whichever is the preferred vendor. All right, so let's do the first scenario in purchase orders. We're just going to say you need some inventory, and you're just going to put in a purchase order for some stuff and have it sent to you. So we go to purchase and purchase orders, and then we're going to say, let's say it's Invacare. We're going to hit the plus sign, and the first thing you'd see is you need to choose the vendor. Well, you can start typing in some letters there. You can use the drop down, or you can go to the ellipse button and get a list of all vendors. And in here, you can set up new vendors or edit vendors. I'm just going to edit this one and go through a couple fields that are in the vendor setup. The beginning here, you have the vendor's name, address, phone number. And then we have a remit to address. The remit to address would be used if you're going to be using our accounts payable and you're going to print out a check and send it to the vendor. Maybe they have a different remit to address than you have over here in this address. Maybe it's a PO box for all their checks. So that's where you would want to put that information in. Under the information tab, there's a bunch of things here. First is your account number with them. And then discount days, that's going to be used for accounts payable. We have ship via, that's something that is used in the purchase order you'll see. Lead days, that is approximately how many days it takes for you to get a shipment from the day that you put in the purchase order. So those are things, and then there's some notes here that will default to all purchase orders. You can put in comments. You'll have the history of this vendor. And then if you are going to be doing electronic purchase orders with this vendor, then you need to set up this EDI, and you'll have a specific submitter and receiver ID from the vendor. All right, so we're going to choose Invacare as our vendor, and then you'll see I am signed in, so that's who is requesting this purchase order. Now, because I am a supervisor, it automatically checks off this person approving and puts my name in there. But sometimes if you're not a supervisor, it will not put that in there, and you have to then go and approve the purchase orders, which I'll show you. This came from the vendor. There is a confirmation number that you can put in after you've ordered it. Because I've set that up as doing electronically, this send electronically shows up. I'm going to uncheck it because I'm not doing anything electronic. Shows you some terms, shipping, today's date, and then expected delivery. And again, that was those 3-day lead time that I set up. You have a box for freight and a send date if that was electronic. Basically, all I did was choose the vendor. I'm not changing anything else. Once I have all that set up, then I go down to the bottom and click on the plus sign to add my first item. So my first item was the walker with wheels. And it comes up with the case because that's what I said was the preferred vendor and unit. Let's say we're going to get 2 cases of these in. It automatically put the price and multiplied that times 2. This doesn't require a tracking number, but we'll do one later. It has the vendor reorder number there. Some things on the right once you post this, and you have comments that you can add on here. Once you're done with that, you hit OK. Now you can add your next item. We do the plus sign again, and maybe we're going to do test strips. So here's a message that I got, and it says that this item is not normally ordered from this vendor. So that just means that the vendor is not set up on this item. You can still say yes. Now it's not going to put any price in here, but you don't have to put a price on it right now. You're probably going to wait and get it from the vendor. So we'll leave that alone, but maybe we want 3 boxes. And what's going to happen is once I get this item in from the vendor and post it, it'll add that vendor to the item. And that's what that message is telling me. So we're just going to say, okay, and we'll do one more item. We'll do a wheelchair. Oh, we'll do a couple items. Now we'll do that. We'll say that we're getting in 2 wheelchairs. Now, I don't know what the tracking or serial numbers are yet, so I'm not going to go down there and put anything in. And let's see, do we want to do anything else? We'll do one more item. And again, if you don't know the item ID, you can go to the ellipse button and do your searches. And I'm just going to do a semi-electric bed. And we'll say just one of those. Again, if a price comes up, it means that there is a vendor set up. This vendor is set up for this item, and you have a last cost in there. That also will get updated. If this item doesn't cost $350, it costs $375. Once I receive the purchase order in, it'll update the last cost, so the next purchase order will have the new price in it. So at this point, that's my purchase order. So I could print out a purchase order form by going to the printer, choosing purchase order, and here is the purchase order. And again, we don't have a price for the test strips, but we'll get that in later. If you need to print it out, go ahead, but here's our purchase order. Did the purchase order print correctly? When I say yes, if I happen to go back and reprint it again, it will remind me that it's already been printed. So you don't print it out twice and order things twice. You can always say yes to print it out again. At this point, the way we designed this module is that you may not be the person that can approve this. So you might just save that purchase order, and then somebody else might come along and go through the purchase orders that have not been approved yet. So let's say this one here. And since again, I am a supervisor, it automatically puts my name there, but if it didn't, then you would come down to the bottom to the third icon and click on it, and it would put the name of the user that's signed into TeamDME. But everything has to be approved, and again, in our scenario, you would never order anything that's not approved yet. So now we'll do some other scenarios in a minute. I'm going to continue on with this one, and then we'll go back and add some other purchase orders. But let's say that the purchase order, the items came in from the vendor. So now you have to mark them as being received. Now, if you had a barcode reader on your computer, you can just scan the items. So if I was in this purchase order, I could just scan the items that came in, and it would automatically mark the lines that you skip. So in other words, if you scan a case of Walker with wheels, it would automatically go in and do this for one case. That's what it would do, and it would be green. That means that it's been partially received, 1 out of 2. If you scan another case, then what it would do is it would mark received 2, and it would automatically turn blue because all of the ordered is received. And you could just scan all the items, and it would mark each one of them that it finds. If it doesn't find the item on your purchase order, it'll add another line here with that item. Again, if you had a barcode reader, if the items were set up to have a barcode in them. Now, so if you don't have a barcode reader, then you just have to go down the list and mark which items came in. Now for the last two, you can't mark them because they need some type of serial or tracking number. So for this one, let's just do the bed first. I can come down here to tracking, and you see that there's only one line there. You can't do a plus sign. All you can do is put in a tracking number, hit the check mark, and hit OK. So I've entered one tracking number, and that's all that is being received and has been ordered. So all of it has been received or flagged as being received, so it turns blue. This one here, the wheelchair, if I go in, there are 2 slots. If I only get one of the wheelchairs, just put in one number, hit the check mark, and it'll be 1 received and 1 on back order. Now, if you're not going to get that second one, then just change the order, quantity ordered to 1, so that the received matches the order. But if you're going to get it later on, you can leave it as a back order. So at this point, these are the items that you just received in from the vendor. And at this point, there's a few things that you can print from here. First thing you can do is go down to the printer icon on the bottom left and do what's called an item label. An item label is something that can print out that in case it doesn't have a barcode on it, you can take these labels and stick them onto your items. Now these item labels, they're a Avery label number 5160. They're only 2 by 7 per sheet. But you can take them and put them on your items. The other thing you can do, if you notice, these are all item labels for items, but not necessarily tracking numbers. If for some reason your item doesn't have a tracking number, or if you really want to put another label on them, Then you can go down to the bottom where the printer is and choose tracking item labels. And this would print out, should print out your tracking numbers. Doesn't want to do that. I have them in there. That would print out again on the same 2x7 label, a tracking number label. Once you're completely done with this purchase order, you just hit OK to save it. Now it is green because not everything that we ordered is received in yet, and that's okay. But that's as far as you go with that. And then we'll show you the end of day steps that we will post all of these into our inventory, into a history and all that stuff. I'm going to do a couple more purchase orders now to show you there's another kind of purchase order that you can create. So from medical orders, if I'm in medical orders, and I'm going to choose this last order that I have set up. So in this order, we're ordering a grab bar for Roy Rogers. And maybe you're going to get it drop shipped from the vendor. You don't have to now go into purchase orders and create a purchase order and make sure you get the correct item and all. You can create a purchase order from a medical order. And to do that, I brought up the medical order. I go down to the bottom to the printer. And from the printer, about a quarter of the way down, I see purchase orders. And it says ship to customer or to company. If I ship it to the customer, then if you send a purchase order electronically, then it would be addressed to the customer. It would be addressed to the customer, or to the company, it would be the company. Also, the purchase order form itself will either have your company name or your company name plus the customer's name. So if I choose by customer, it'll say PO will be created to the customer, hit OK. And then I have to hit OK one more time here or it's not created. And it also gives me one purchase order created. It also gives me the purchase order number, 1015. So let's go and take a look at that purchase order that was just created. I'm going to go to purchase and purchase orders. And now I should have one down here. And here's the purchase order. It created it automatically from the default vendor on that item. And if I go to the second tab, the shipping tab, it actually has the medical order number here. And it says company name, but because we said I want it shipped to the customer, it actually put the customer's name and address in here so that either for this PO or for an electronic PO, it has shipped to the customer's name. I can show you that on the actual purchase order form. So ship to Roy Rogers on the right-hand side. While I'm here, just to show you, there are some comments that you can add to purchase orders, and then also a shipping notice, and this is all going to be for electronic. So electronically, you get a bunch of notices coming back from the vendor. You get an acknowledgement that they received it. You get another report saying if it's being shipped or if it's back order or things like that. And you get about 4 different reports, depending upon the vendor, that come back. And they'll all be stored in here. So that's the second way to do, oh, and let's just mark this one. No, we don't want to mark this one. No, we won't mark that one. We haven't received it, or the customer has not received it yet. So the last way to create a purchase order is by suggested purchase orders. Now, a suggested purchase order is going to depend on how your item is set up. So let's go back to that walker with wheels and see how that item might be set up. And basically, it all has to do with how you set up the location. And the location is going to be taking this quantity on hand, which now says minus 42, which means that we haven't added inventory in a while in our system. But if that number goes below this minimum of 20, it will order enough to get you to 25. But it doesn't just consider quantity on hand. It also considers quantity on order. That's medical orders. So if there was a 5 in there, it would take minus 42, add 5 to give me minus 47, and that's way below 20, so it would order enough to get me to 25. But then again, if we look over here, we have 4 purchase orders that haven't been received in yet, so it would deduct these 4. So it takes quantity on hand plus quantity on order minus purchase orders and looks at the minimum on hand. And the minimum is down here. You can change that down here, and the maximum. So it's going to do that for all your items automatically. So let's go in. Let's do that. So we go back to purchase orders. And then we go to the printer. We don't go into a purchase order. We are in the purchase order list. We click on the printer, and at the bottom, we have suggested orders. When we click on that, it's going to show me a big long list of everything that needs to be ordered. And you can see you have your minimum and maximum and quantity on hands. And I can make this bigger so that you can see all the columns, and that last column there. Let's make this one a little smaller so we can see. So it's taking minus 4, quantity on hand, quantity on medical orders, quantity on purchase orders, so negative 4, so that's 2, 14, so it's below the 40, and it needs to get to a maximum, it must be 8, get it to a maximum of 100, so it's going to order 92 pieces. There should be that walker in here somewhere. Here we go. So it's saying that it needs to order 32 cases, remembering that each case is 2 eaches, but all of these are eaches. So it needs to order 32, or actually 64 cases, 64 eaches to get it enough to get to 42. Sorry, to get it to 25. So it's something that the system figures out. If you don't want something, you can just unmark these. Now, all of these that don't have a vendor, they're not going to get ordered anyway. But anything with a vendor would get ordered. And it's going to look at all the Invacare ones and make one purchase order for that. All the Sunrise and make one purchase order for that, and so on. So you can, doesn't matter, I won't uncheck them all, and I'll show you that the ones that don't have check marks, they just will not get into a purchase order without a vendor setup. When I hit OK, it now shows you the same thing in a report format. At that point, when you close it down, it asks, do you want to create all those purchase orders? If I said yes, now it's going to create a bunch of purchase orders for me. So purchase orders were created. They still have to be marked approved. But here they are. It started with this one, and it went down the list. Now, why are these two we'd have to look and see why it made a separate purchase order for two different things, and then this one. So it made three Invacare purchase orders. We'll have to see why it did that. So at this point, if you wanted to print out all the purchase orders that are new, you don't have to go into each one of these and print them out. You can go back to the printer up top and do purchase orders. And if the purchase order has already been printed, it will not print it again. But if it hasn't, then I know starting with 1016, there might be some other ones in here. So let's take a look. Purchase order. So actually 994. So there were 4 that hadn't been printed, and then all of these that we just created. Oh, I can tell you why the different Invacare ones. So here, let's take a look at this. So if we look at this, see if we can find it. There's an Invacare getting shipped to Roy Rogers. So that's a separate purchase order. We knew that one. But here we have Invacare and it's being shipped to the Nashville location. If the purchase orders had different locations, like here, this is Nick's location, it would be a separate purchase order. And then here's St. Mary's location. So different locations require separate purchase orders. And again, once I close that down and say yes, then those will not print out again if I choose up here and choose purchase orders. There's nothing that hasn't been printed yet. If I needed another purchase order printing, yes, I would have to go back into it and print it out. That works the same as in medical orders. You can do that. You can print out all the medical order delivery tickets at one time. And then once you mark those, they don't print out again unless you go into the medical order and reprint them. And again, if I go into one of these, because I am a supervisor, it'll automatically mark it for me as approving. But if you're not, then you would have to go to this pen over here that says sign authorized purchase, and it would put the user's name at the top if you had that permissions available. Okay, so let's take a look at some things here. All right, so at the end of the day, you're going to take all of the received purchase orders and post them into inventory and into history. The first step would be to go back to the printer icon and run this received items list. This is going to show you everything that will go into your inventory and history. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at something here. We've got, get out my marker here. For 4444, which was the walker with wheels, it's ordering 30 cases, which would be 60 pieces. Oh, no, sorry. It's ordering 60 cases, which will be 120. So we're just going to look at that one for a minute. And I'm also going to show you that on any report in TeamDME, if you see a plus sign, you can click on it and it'll automatically give you more information about every line. And you can see here, now you actually can see the description of the item and when it was ordered. It'll show you everything that is going to be received. and it also shows you the tracking numbers. Again, we had one hospital bed, but we had 2 wheelchairs that we ordered, but we're only receiving 1 of them. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to go and take a look at, we'll take a look at the hospital bed and the walker with wheels. So let's erase that. And we're not going to do anything with this yet because I want to come back to it. So if we go into my inventory, item 7777, no, 4444, that's the walker with wheels. So what it's going to do is it's going to take the 60, was it 60 cases, and put in, add 120 to this. But I think that's wrong. I think it's going to do like 60. We'll have to look at that again. 4444, and quantity on hand is 40 minus 42, 4. So it's thinking, oh yeah, here. But we got quantity owned. We'll have to look at the numbers again. But whatever it's going to receive in, it's going to add it to quantity on hand. And that number is going to be adjusted if the suggested purchase order was done, then it would add all of those back into the quantity on hand. If it was the hospital bed, then what it does is it's going to add that tracking number into your tracking numbers here for the bed. And when it adds that in, it'll automatically increase the quantity on hand, whichever, it's probably this one here. Yep, 1 on purchase orders. It'll add 1 to here automatically. So let's see how it does. We'll go back to our purchase order list. And at this point, I'm going to post my purchase orders with the diskette all the way to the right, today's date, and I hit OK. And we got a tracking number null, which means that some item that we have doesn't have a tracking number, but it's required. My guess is it's the wheelchair. So let's see if I'm correct. Now it just has the 1 there, which is correct, and receiving 1 there. So that all looks correct. All right, well, let's just mark my 1 purchase order. So if you, inside of TeamDME, if you just want to highlight 1 order, purchase order, medical order, that's what these check boxes on the left are for. If I click on that, and then up at the top in the middle, there's a box with a check mark. If I click on that, it'll isolate only the checked lines. That means it's only going to do anything with that specific purchase order. And then if I, again, print out the purchase order itself, I mean the received report, again, this is the only one, there was other ones. So this is the only thing that's going to get posted now. And then if we post, let's see if we can get that through. There we go. So now the purchase order is still in purchase orders. And that's because there was a partial purchase order for that. So it's probably this one here. Is that the one? Yes. So if you notice, the walker, the test strips, and the hospital bed are grayed out. That means they have been posted. If you go into one of them, at the top, it'll say posted right here. You can't do anything with them. They're in the history. They're just sitting there because it's part of this purchase order. The only thing you can do anything with is the wheelchair, because that one still has one on back order right here in this 6th or 7th, 8th column. So let's go and see what has happened with those items. So for the walker, that purchase order had 2 cases and it said 4 pieces. So that should have changed our location here. And I believe that said minus 42. Now it's only at minus 38 because it increased your quantity on hand by 4 because we ordered 2 cases at 2 each. And then if we go to the bed, we will see that that tracking number is now in our list. There it is. And so that should have added 1 over here. And now it says 3 instead of 2. So we're updating the quantity on hand with whatever additions are in the purchase order. Let's go back to the purchase order list now. So now there are other things. One other thing you can do here is maybe you want a report of anything that's been back ordered just to see if you want to delete it or change the quantity or do whatever you want with it. You can go back to the printer icon and do back ordered items, and it'll show you any back ordered items that are in purchase orders. So here's something that was on a different purchase order, but then there's a wheelchair still. Now there's one other purchase order I can show you, and that's if you're returning something to the vendor. You want to keep track of that so that it'll update your inventory. So everything works exactly the same way, except that when you get to the quantity, you're going to do a negative. So maybe we're going to do an each, and then we're going to do a -1 where you click on the down arrow to get the calculator, do the plus minus button, and now it's going to return that to the vendor and take 1 out of your inventory. If it had a tracking number, you can put in the tracking number. And then everything else is the same. Now, if they're price, we don't put anything in there right now, but you can later on. Oh, that's what I forgot to do. Now, the one thing, well, let me show you this for a second. Let me show you what I forgot to do with this purchase order. When I was receiving the items in, I made a mistake, and this item did not have a price. So I should have, when I was saying that it came in, put in a price here so that it would update the vendor tab on the item. If I put in a price there when I received it in, besides adding this vendor to this item, this is the one that said the vendor was not normally set up for this item, it would have added that vendor plus the last cost. So I'll show you that item here. So it did put in Invacare there, but because I didn't have a cost, it did not update the last cost. It did put in the last purchase date, but no cost here. That would be something that you would then want to update. All right, let me see if we have any questions so far. I'm going to put you on hold for a minute and take a look. So just hang on for a second. All right, I see no questions yet, so we got a couple more things to go over. So once the purchase orders have been received, and if there was nothing else on the purchase order, then the purchase order will get moved to purchase history. If we look in purchase history, you'll see at the bottom here, this should be, yes, this is the actual purchase order minus one of the wheelchairs because that did not get received, only one of them did. So this will just show you every single thing that was received. If you wanted some reports out from purchase history, you can go to the printer and choose purchase orders. This is just going to print out every single purchase order that was received by purchase order, by vendor, by purchase order. If you wanted it in a little more of a report, you can go to received items. This is going to sort by item instead of by purchase order to see everything that was received. And then the last thing is when you are in purchase orders and you have some purchase orders that are flagged as electronic, this is where you're going to create a file and send it from. And if anybody knows how to make or create files for claims, it's very similar. But you don't go to the printer icon, you go up top here to the word edit, and you do electronic orders EDI, and this would create purchase orders, files on your system. And this would create as many files as needed. And then if you created any purchase orders, that's when the web service client comes up for you to hit send receive. I don't have anything that can send, so I can't do that. Now, if anybody knows this web service client, it used to send and receive everything that is in TeamDME when you hit send receive. It would do the purchase orders. It would do claims. It would pull in payment files. Anything that was going through the web service client, it would do. We have changed that so that if you're in purchase orders and hit send receive, it'll only send purchase orders and get reports for the purchase orders. It will not send your claims file, not pull in payment files. If you were in payments, it would only do the payment files and not purchase orders or claims. And in claims, it only does the claim files and the reports that match those. It will not do purchase orders or payments. And that's because we might have different people doing different areas and they don't want their orders sent when they're not ready for them, or they don't want to pull in payment files if they're not doing payments. So we split that up. So now when you're in a certain area, payments, medical order, claims pending, and purchase orders, each one of those looks the same, but only will do certain things that match that area that you're in. But if you ever wanted to just bring up that web service client in purchase orders, let's say you just want to see if there's any reports, you can go to edit and web service client, and that would bring up the window again. And then this last one, purchase summation history, that's going to show you all the purchase orders that were sent. And then these are different reports up here. Let me just make them a little bigger. Each of these numbers signifies a certain report. So there's 4 of them here, 997, 855, 856, and 810. Depending upon the vendor, you may not get all of them, but then you'll get green flags, orange flags, and red flags. And if you see any orange or red, then there's an issue, and you can look in here and find out what the issue is, like if something is back ordered or out of stock or something like that. It'll show you in this purchase submission history. Okay, that's all I have for today. I want to see if anybody has any questions before we end the webinar. I don't see any. I'll give you another couple seconds here if you had any questions or not. I don't see any, so I'm going to stop the recording.